Hi, my name's Catherine from Crime Psych. In the previous two videos, I've talked about knife crime and why people think it's been increasing over the last few years. There have been a range of explanations offered for the increase in serious violent crimes involving knives. There does seem to be a big difference in the views between academics, police officers, other officials, the media, residents, parents and families and young people about knife crime and why it's increased. Whenever I talk to general people within the community about knife crime, they tell me that they think it's increased partly because of police funding cuts. As I have mentioned in a previous video, we know that the police have suffered severe funding shortages and cutbacks. It is extremely unlikely to see a police officer walking around in the neighbourhood anymore. However, it has been proven that more police on the beat within communities is unlikely to reduce the number of knife crime instances. Some members of the community automatically assume that if they see a group of young boys or young people, that they must be getting up to no good, they must be causing trouble. And they're treated as outcasts that nobody wants around because of the trouble that they cause. When there's a group of young people, some people tend to avoid them or they might feel unsafe around them. However, that can be very, very damaging for young people, because if young people feel like they're a problem, not valued within community, or only good for causing trouble, they have nowhere else to go because we have no cheap social spaces that they can use to get together and hang out. They're constantly targeted. This will affect their self-esteem and as such will affect their behaviour. In last week's video, I outlined some of my thoughts on why I thought there'd been an increase in knife crime and other serious violent offences. I said that the ease of the availability of knives will almost certainly have had some kind of an impact. However, knives were available before the sudden increase in crime rates, and therefore it cannot be the only factor. In my opinion, everybody's attitude towards knife crime is the main thing that's changed. We're being fed a constant stream of media reports about the increases in knife crime. We see politicians on the television arguing about police cuts and suggesting or hinting that it leads to more crime, and nobody can escape the constant stream of media reports on the subject. And I believe that this, amongst other things, has contributed to the rise in knife crime, and it does seem to be like an ever-growing problem with no real solution. However, it might surprise you to learn that there is already a proven programme for reducing serious violent crime. Glasgow, Cali in Colombia, and Chicago, Boston and Los Angeles in America have all seen extraordinary results from treating violence like a disease. As early as 2002, the World Health Organization released a report recommending that violence should be treated as a public health issue rather than simply just a matter of law and order. Using an integrated system, several cities have successfully and dramatically reduced the number of instances of serious violent crime. The overall objective to this programme is to not simply focus on suppressing violence through arrests or gang-busting measures, but to try to address the societal problems which include poverty, mental health, education, issues of addiction and lack of opportunity. In 2005, Glasgow was dubbed the murder capital of Europe, thanks to a deadly wave of violence which was fuelled by territorial gangs and major issues with drugs and alcohol. That same year, a United Nations report dubbed Scotland to be the most violent country in the developed world. This was disputed and criticised by politicians and by police. But the police in the city are all too familiar with a continuous cycle of highly publicised crackdowns for violent serial attacks or knife crime, for it to spike again once that initiative had ended. Mr. Rennie who was the then chief superintendent in Strathclyde Police, was one of several Scottish officials who realised it was time to try something new in the area. The year that the force established the Scotland Violence Reduction Unit, which helped to cut Glasgow's murder rate by a staggering 60% in 10 years. And prior to this, police in Glasgow had conducted several campaigns to take weapons off the street, and they prosecuted the offenders who'd done it. However, once these offenders were released from prison, they were simply picking up weapons again. And Mr. Rennie spoke out to say that he thought it was foolish for Glasgow to think that it could arrest its way out of the problem. The Violence Reduction Unit was established to forge partnerships with schools, hospitals, social workers and charities, and to spread the message that violence was preventable and not inevitable. As part of the programme, gang members were called in to talk about their lifestyles. They were also called in to diffuse tensions between the various groups and gangs before they escalated into violence. Trained members of staff acted as interrupters and were well known already within the community. And these interrupters would attempt to intervene before these feuds erupted into gun violence or knife crime. During an interview, Mr. Rennie had stated that he found a lot of people who were involved in violence simply didn't want to be. And I know this from my work with offenders. During one interview that I did, a prisoner who was a former member of the Triads had told me that he didn't want to be involved in violence, but he had to take part in it because he wanted the protection of the gang. Mr. Rennie said that before the programme was introduced, there was a major problem with territorial gangs in Scotland. But these interrupters broke that cycle, and Glasgow no longer has that problem. As part of the programme, there was something called Street and Arrow, which is a street food van which gives former offenders a job for a year and offers them support and training so that they can move on to find further employment. Finding employment once you've been in prison can be very difficult. If offenders can't find a job and provide for themselves, then they're much more likely to then reoffend. Another aspect of the programme was called Medics Against Violence, and this was set up by 3 surgeons who were just sick of dealing with the devastation that knife crime and other violent crime caused. And it sent volunteers into schools to advise children how to stay out of violent situations. Staff at the Violence Reduction Unit also worked in local A&E departments, speaking to victims of violence and to seek to persuade gang members to avoid a cycle of revenge and engage with drug or alcohol services where necessary. The programme of reducing violent crime has already been successfully used in other major cities. The city of Cali in Colombia had a phenomenally high murder rate, which was mainly drug related. In 1995, the murder ratio was 100 murders per 100,000 of the population. But by 2018, this number had fallen to 47.3 murders per 100,000 residents. And this was the work of Dr. Concha Eastman and his team. They looked at where violence was taking place, and they introduced interventions which included the restriction of alcohol sales and restriction of access to weapons. They also increased police surveillances and enforcement using 24-hour courts. And this, combined with programmes to improve access to education and employment and improve social mobility, made a big difference. An important factor to consider is that this should be an overall approach and not simply focusing on one aspect, such as a weapons amnesty, for example, or increasing patrols or arrests. The government can have an impact on things like education, jobs, opportunities, what the schools do, what the police do, what community groups do. They're all important factors that need to be brought together and work together. In order to bring all of these various agencies together, an overall organisation is required, and that's what the Violent Reduction Unit aims to do. It's recently been announced that Merseyside will be the latest city to use this model to reduce serious violent crime. Superintendent Mark Wiggins from Merseyside Police said that in June, the Home Office announced that it would be allocating £3.37 million worth of funding to Merseyside Police for this financial year to set up the Violence Reduction Unit and to provide an effective public health approach to reducing violent crime, to bring about early intervention and protect our communities. He said that work was underway within the community, and various representatives from organisations across Merseyside, which included local authorities, health trusts, education and other key stakeholders, which will all work together within the Violence Reduction Unit, and this will provide a comprehensive approach to tackling serious violent crime. The partnership will be focused on making the streets of Merseyside a safer place by working in partnership using this public health approach, looking at early intervention and protection to reduce instances of serious violent crime, including knife crime, in the area. In conclusion then, this programme is by no way a quick fix. It's a 10-year programme before we see results. However, it's a very welcomed intervention for an ever-increasing problem in places like Merseyside. The cost of implementing this programme is considerably less than the amount of money that would be required on murder investigations. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I do hope that you found it interesting. Bye for now.